Hot damn, what is better than a slow blues in order to really bring out that reverb? Hi there, I'm Jeffrey Schmidt, and today I have a reverb pedal shootout for you. Today we're shooting out two TC Electronic budget line. One of them is not so budget line actually, but anyway, two TC Electronic reverb pedals. The first pedal is the Drip Spring Reverb. And the second pedal is the SkySurfer Reverb. Now on the Drip Spring Reverb, we have three knobs. We have a dwell, which is the length of the reverb. We have a mix, which of course gives you how much of the dry signal versus how much of the wet signal is mixed in. And then we have a tone knob, which basically rolls off the high end the more you turn it to the right. And the SkySurfer Reverb also has three knobs. It has a reverb knob, which is also the length or duration of the reverb, whether it's long or short. We have a mix knob as well, and we also have a tone knob. So that makes this comparison quite interesting and appropriate. On the other hand, we do have a three-way toggle switch here that can be set either to spring reverb, plate reverb, or hall reverb. And since the other one is basically a spring reverb, this comparison will be based on only the spring setting of the SkySurfer Reverb. And by the way, if you're interested in me doing a full review on the SkySurfer Reverb so that you can hear the other two settings, let me know in the comments below. So now that you have an idea for how these two reverbs sound, based upon the intro tune, I thought we would go through each section of the intro tune bit by bit so that I can point out what I hear. And I encourage you to put on headphones when you listen to these, because even though I did my best to really add a lot of reverb so that you could hear the differences, depending on what you're listening through, the differences might not be so obvious. So let's listen to the first section of this tune. Now, as you may have heard if you put your quality headphones on, the drip reverb has sort of a slapback delay sort of sound in it almost. And also another thing is that the lower mids, like around 300 hertz, 400 hertz, are a bit less present, which makes the drip reverb less muddy. On the other hand, the SkySurfer Reverb is sort of what you hear on the old recordings from the 70s. It's a very classic sound, which has a lot of those lower mids in there, which depending on the sound you're going for, you might want or you might not want. If you have a very dense mix, having a ton of lower mids can really make your mix muddy quick. On the other hand, with a very sparse mix like this one, having those lower mids in the reverb can make the instrument that the effect is on sound quite big and really take up that space that you might want it to take up, especially if it's a sparse mix like this one. Now let's listen to the next clip where the bass guitar comes in. So in that clip we had the bass guitar come in, and now you can hear a bit more what you might like about these two reverbs or not like about these two reverbs in a mix. Because from my point of view, the drip reverb allows us to hear the articulation of the bass much more, which again gives us more of a modern sound, more like very refined sound, where each instrument has its place. Whereas the SkySurfer Reverb, which sounds a bit more traditional and again is a bit more warm or a bit more muddy, depending on if you want to use the positive or the negative term for it, it covers up the bass a bit more, and so you can't hear the articulation of the bass quite as well. Let's go to the next section where the drums come in. And so here with the drums coming in, we get even a better sense of what this reverb might sound like in a full mix. Once again, the drip reverb allows us to hear the drums and the bass better than we do in the case of the SkySurfer reverb. And then I have one last clip for you from that intro tune where I go into some more densely articulated chords, because everything up to now on the guitar has been single notes. And so as you saw in that last clip, when you play full chords with both of these reverbs, once again you can hear the articulation even in the guitar itself better with the drip reverb, right? But you're trying to hear the upper harmonic frequencies and the way that they interact through a very big sounding reverb in this case. And once again, the drip reverb allows us to do that better than the SkySurfer reverb. Now that we've gone through all those samples, let me know which reverb you like better in the comments. I think it's really a question of taste. So lastly, I'll include a section here where I talk about what I think about these two reverbs, not just sonically, but how I use them and my preferences concerning them. So one thing to note is that at the current time, the drip reverb is about twice the price of the SkySurfer reverb. So it does sound a bit more modern and a bit more refined in a certain way, but on the other hand, it is more expensive. And now I'll come to my own personal opinion. Personally speaking, I do actually prefer more the traditional sounding reverb. I'm a big fan of 70s music, and of course the SkySurfer spring reverb really replicates what spring reverb sounded like in the 70s. So I personally tend to use the SkySurfer quite a bit. If you've read any of the gear chain listings at the end of my videos, you'll often find the SkySurfer there. Now it does tend to be a little bit muddy, but again, it gives you that vintage tone. And so I tend to use only just a touch of it. Here in this video, I add a lot of reverb, just so that no matter what device you're on, you'll be able to hear the difference, hopefully. But in practice, when I record my tracks, I use much less reverb. And in that case, whether you're using the drip reverb or the SkySurfer reverb, I think the differences are actually not so great in that case when you use only just a tiny amount of reverb, which is what I typically do. And yet I'm still very glad to have it, because you need some element of space, whether it be delay or reverb. And I personally prefer to do that when I record, so that my mixing operations are simple instead of playing with reverb in the box afterwards, which is certainly possible, and I have nothing against other people doing it. That's just my preferred process. Another thing to note about the drip reverb that is a negative, you can hear some digital artifacts in the drip reverb in the case where you use it with a direct pedal. And that could be annoying, and I want to put that out there for those of you that might be shopping for one of these pedals. And I have not heard ever any artifacts like that with the SkySurfer. So that's another plus for the SkySurfer with me. Actually, I use the drip reverb for bass, which I find it's better suited to bass because, again, it has less of the lower frequencies, which can be really, really a problem mix-wise for bass guitar if you put a lot of reverb on it. So actually in this mix that you heard, all of the bass guitar was recorded with the drip reverb. Now in this case I recorded the bass direct, and so the drip reverb followed a direct pedal, a SansAmp Paradriver DI. So in this case, as well as with the guitar, if you record with direct pedals, there's still usually a little bit more of the high frequencies left with direct pedals as compared to a real guitar amp, which usually cuts off the high frequencies a bit more, which is why I believe that with the drip reverb, you can hear slightly some digital artifacts in the very high frequencies, which, especially when I'm tracking, is a little bit annoying. I've learned to ignore it because I think that otherwise it's actually a nice reverb when I record bass. And as long as there are other instruments besides the bass, you'll never hear these little artifacts because they're quite subtle. But when you're tracking and you're hearing the instrument that you're tracking, the loudest of course, it's somewhat annoying. So I'll try to put a sample of that with the bass guitar now so that you can try to see whether these artifacts might actually bother you. And so the last thing, of course, is that when I have the SkySurfer reverb out, I can toggle between all three types of reverb, and with the drip reverb, I can't do that. So that's another reason as well. In addition to liking the vintage sound of the SkySurfer more, I also like having that possibility of toggling between three different reverb sounds, which is nice. So there you have it. That was my shootout. We did a shootout between the SkySurfer reverb and the drip spring reverb pedal made by TC Electronic. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it or got something out of it, please give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Have a good day.